ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
It sounds fanciful, like it could never happen here, but an investigation into Australia's IVF sector has found a very dark side. An Australian woman born via IVF thinks she could have up to 700 siblings. Another woman's eggs were fertilised with the wrong sperm, and embryos were thrown away after being accidentally contaminated. It's all happened. Today, Four Corners reporter Grace Tobin on the scandals the fertility industry would prefer to keep hidden. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Grace, IVF, it is being used more and more by Australians wanting to have a family. I think it's something like 1 in 18 babies born here now were actually conceived by IVF. So there's a lot of people using it.
Absolutely. I think we probably all know someone or have been through it ourselves. You know, it's something that is becoming more and more common, and it is only going to keep growing.
Yeah.
Infertility rates are getting worse, I suppose, within the population globally. And so it's an industry that more and more we're going to be relying on.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's good to have a look at this industry, which is what you've done for Four Corners. And you really have found that, unfortunately, there is a dark side. I want you to start by telling me about Sophie and Amelia Hawkshaw.
So Sophie and Amelia Hawkshaw and their husbands Josh and Zach, they're very private people, but they have felt compelled to speak out for the first time with us about their experience with one of the big 3 fertility clinics called Genea. They had IVF there. Amelia doesn't produce her own eggs, and so Sophie, her sister, had donated her eggs to her to use.
It was, just the 2 of us growing up with my parents, and we're only 2 years apart. Yeah, it's always kind of been the 2 amigos of Amelia and I. That I kind of flippantly said, I'll just give you some of my eggs. I'll just donate eggs.
The sisters are, only 2 years apart in age. They're extremely close, and they have felt very vulnerable through this situation.
So generous, isn't it, of Sophie to offer to donate her eggs to her sister? It's really quite touching.
It is, and it was, a promise that was made when they were teenagers. That's when Amelia found out that she had this medical issue. And so Sophie has just said throughout their whole upbringing that this is something that she would do. When Sophie had her retrieval procedure last August, she got 22 eggs, and from that, 17 embryos were fertilised. And she just considered that an excellent result for their family. They were very excited. She just felt like, I've, done my part in all of this.
And that was just so exciting. It was such good news. I felt like my job was done.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, 22 eggs and 17 fertilised. Sounds like a pretty good outcome. But then, of course, Grace, things started to go wrong.
Yes, unfortunately. So basically the normal process is that you'd get an update a few days later telling you how the embryos were tracking, but instead the sisters got a call on day 2 telling them that the embryos, all 17 of them, had been contaminated with bacteria and had to be destroyed. And she was told that she'd get a call from Genea to organise the next steps.
There's 17 embryos. I mean, they were all like potential children that we could have had.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So what did the company say to them about how these embryos were actually contaminated? That's really concerning.
Yeah, look, I mean, that event in itself is bad enough, right? Having 17 embryos and thinking that you're about to start this IVF process. I mean, for people who don't know, it is an incredibly taxing process physically and emotionally. So to be hit with this news just, days into the process is something that they've really struggled to grapple with. But I think what's more than that is the traumatizing experience of not being told just up front, how did this happen? How on earth does a lab get contaminated? How does bacteria get into embryos? And we're not just talking about one family here, there were 3 families affected. And so that's definitely been the most traumatic part for Sophie and Amelia.
Did they get to the bottom of what actually happened?
Well, look, early on, Janaea did indicate to them that there was a staff member with dermatitis on their hands working that day. But the crucial thing is that it won't confirm that in any official capacity. So it won't release the full details of its findings in the investigation.
It's clear that human error was involved in the incident. And human error does happen. But for us, what's really caused the trauma and kind of affected us long term has been how we've been treated since the incident occurred.
How difficult has it been to extract information from Janaea about what went wrong?
Impossible. Absolutely impossible.
So Janaea told us in response to questions we asked about why it won't release this root cause analysis report. It said it has been transparent about the incident with all stakeholders and has engaged in open disclosure with the patients.
But I think people need to know that when things go wrong, this is what Janaea does. This is how they treat people. This is the company you're getting into bed with.
So, for Sophie and Amelia, Grace, it's been just a really tough road, I suppose you can say. But, they're not the only ones, are they? Because you've uncovered quite a few pretty terrible stories.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been looking into allegations of the wrong sperm being used to conceive children. So even in the face of DNA evidence, the clinic involved in that is refusing to own up. Then there's, this sperm donor who has been used to make babies despite potential genetic issues. So there's, we've come across 3 different mums who've all used this same sperm donor. Between them, they have 4 children. They're all half siblings and they have almost identical disabilities. Some of these issues and errors, they might sound on the more extreme side of things, but what's tying them together is the response from the big corporates involved. And it's this lack of information and accountability that is playing out. And it's not just impacting, parents, it's affecting people who were donor conceived as well.
Tell me about Katherine, because her story is unbelievable almost.
It is unbelievable. And, Katherine's donor conceived. She's in her 30s now and she's discovered she's at the centre of this bungle involving 2 of Australia's biggest fertility companies. So she's found that poor vetting practices essentially allowed her donor father to donate sperm under multiple different names at multiple clinics and with alarming consequences. So she met her donor father last year and he actually told her that he donated under 7 different names, including his own.
He said all of the fake names that he used and that he went to 6 clinics and 4 hospitals. So I might not have wanted to believe him, and there might be reason not to believe him, but I've already found siblings across 3 different codes.
And so now she's been doing DNA testing. She's been, matching with siblings through ancestry sites, as well as looking at sibling lists. And she estimates that she could have up to 700 siblings out there.
Oh my gosh. That's unbelievable. All right, so she's using DNA testing. So what she actually found for sure from that testing?
So she knows at this stage that, well, from him, she knows that he went to 6 clinics and 4 hospitals. And so she's got matches at this point for 56 half-siblings. So for her, it's, this is actually starting to stack up.
Yeah, absolutely. And she has a sort of real desire to connect with these people, doesn't she, because of a health condition that she knows about?
Well, that's it. It's not just the figure of 700 potential siblings. It's the fact that she has this critical medical information. There's a pre-cancer risk that's been occurring in several of the siblings, including herself. She's also found out that the donor father has schizophrenia. And so she really wants to warn her other siblings to look out for certain red flags, certain markers of these conditions that they should be aware of. But she's trying to do that on her own through social media.
I have medical information for my siblings I really need them to have that could save their life.
Okay, well, Grace, we know, as we mentioned, the IVF sector is really growing rapidly in Australia. And, it's helping a lot of people, right? But there are these quite disturbing things that are happening as well. So what is going wrong, do you think, in this industry? Are the laws just not fit for purpose?
Look, I think it's very complicated in the sense that right now there's like 30 different pieces of legislation across the country. So each state and territory deals with the fertility industry in its own way. Some states like Queensland currently don't have any legislation. And so really, it's an industry that is evolving very quickly. It's becoming fiercely competitive and profitable. There's heated takeover battles involving private equity firms. And, it's important to note as well that these private companies or ASX-listed companies, they receive huge benefits from taxpayer money through Medicare benefits. So it should actually be expected that there is some transparency here, but it seems to be falling short when it comes to patient care. A lot of the experts and fertility specialists we spoke to said that the national regulator, which is called RTAC, it does a good job when it comes to looking at very specific things that it was set up to do. But when it comes to complaints from patients themselves, it seems to be falling short.
Sounds like there does need to be some sort of change there. Tell me, Grace, what about Sophie and Amelia? What have they done now?
So I guess they really got to the stage where they just were not getting any answers from this clinic, Janaea. They had hit a wall. And so they actually teamed up with other families affected by the contamination in the lab. And they enlisted the help of a state MP, hoping that political pressure would actually force Janaea and New South Wales Health to be transparent and, really wanting this report to be released. But unfortunately, even with this MP in their corner, they haven't had much luck. So Liberal MP Jackie Munro, who they've been working with, she requested the root cause analysis through a parliamentary process.
We know that this has occurred for some women and that they deserve to know exactly what happened to the embryos they thought would develop into families.
But at this stage, the New South Wales government has not pressed Janaea to actually release the report. We know from documents that Janaea raised significant concerns with its release. We don't know what those concerns are, and the New South Wales government has just accepted that at this point.
And what about the sisters? Are they going to keep trying so Amelia can get pregnant?
Amelia is very traumatised by the situation and is trying to process that in her own terms. But she has continued with IVF treatment, but they actually went to a different provider. She shared some very good news with me while I was working on the story recently.
We're really pleased that we are actually pregnant at the moment. So we're expecting in November, which is really huge for us.
But the implications here are really that it's so important to get this right, and having transparency when things go wrong, that is just so paramount.
Grace Tobin is a reporter with Four Corners, which goes to air on ABC TV on Monday nights at 8:30, and you can catch her report on iView. This episode was produced by Jess O'Callaghan and Anna John. Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.